In the 34th century before Christ, someone in the city of Uruk pressed a reed into a clay tablet and made a mark. Not to record a prayer, not to compose a poem, not to preserve a legend, to count jars of barley. The first act of writing in human history was an invoice. Mesopotamia. The word is Greek. It means simply the land between the rivers. The Tigris and the Euphrates, two rivers that descend from the mountains of modern Turkey and carve their way southeast through what is now Iraq before emptying together into the Persian Gulf. Between them lies a broad, flat plain, hot in summer, prone to catastrophic flooding each spring, nearly treeless, with almost no stone, no ore, no natural defenses of Sumerian. By any measure, this is not where a civilization should begin. But every spring, when those two rivers flooded, they deposited something rare across that flat, featureless ground. The richest topsoil on Earth. Dark, deep, endlessly fertile alluvial mud, laid down by millennia of mountain runoff. Mud that could grow barley in a desert. And there was something else. The same rivers that flooded every spring gave the people of this plain a resource that would change the course of human history: clay. Unlimited, ubiquitous, free clay. The only building material a civilization built in the middle of a mudflat would ever need. They would build cities from it. They would write on it. And what they wrote would never decay. By the 35th century before Christ, the city of Uruk stood on the banks of the Euphrates. Not a village, not a settlement, a city. 50,000 people living inside mud brick walls organized around a monumental temple complex called the Iana, the House of Heaven. Nothing like it had ever existed before in the history of the species. Uruk had professional administrators who managed grain distribution across entire regions. It had specialized craftsmen, potters, metalworkers, weavers, who produced goods not for themselves, but for trade. It had a priestly class that controlled the redistribution of agricultural surplus. And here's the problem that Uruk encountered, that no human civilization had ever faced before: scale. When a city of 50,000 people trades in barley, livestock, and cloth across a network spanning the entire Fertile Crescent, how do you remember everything? How do you know that a farmer in the northern district owes 3 jars of oil to a temple administrator in the south? How do you track, across years and seasons, who is paid what and who is not? So around 3100 before Christ, the administrators of Uruk took a reed, pressed its cut end into wet clay at different angles and pressures, and developed a system of signs, first pictures, then abstractions, that could represent quantities, commodities, and names. Cuneiform, the world's first writing system. The oldest surviving written document is a clay tablet excavated from Uruk. It records quantities of barley and beer, distributed to workers as daily rations. No poetry, no prayer, no epic, a payroll ledger. This is the civilization that invented writing, and it invented it because managing an economy at scale required a memory that did not sleep, did not die, and could not lie. Clay was the perfect medium, free, everywhere, and once fired, eternal. From Uruk, the idea spread. Across the Fertile Crescent, over the next several centuries, cities rose. Nippur, Eridu, Lagash, each one a walled city-state with its own king, its own gods, its own army. Together, they constituted the world's first civilization, the Sumerians. What the Sumerians invented between 3000 and 2300 before Christ would not be equaled by any other culture for another 2,000 years. The wheel, invented not by Solus but for the potter's craft, only later adapted for carts and war chariots. A number system built on 60, so mathematically flexible that it could represent any fraction, any astronomical calculation, any division of time. The choice was deliberate. 60 is divisible by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. No other number under 100 offers that range. That is why a minute has 60 seconds. That is why a circle has 360 degrees. The Sumerians decided that 4,000 years ago. It has set never been revised. Irrigation systems that turned desert into farmland across thousands of square kilometers. The city itself, not just a large settlement, but an organized political unit with administrators, laws, specialists, and a standing army. And then, around 2334 before Christ, something changed. A man named Sargon, an Akkadian from the city of Kish, seized power and within a generation had conquered every city-state in Mesopotamia. For the first time in recorded history, a single ruler controlled a continuous empire. Sargon of Akkad is the first emperor in human history, not a king who ruled a city, a king who ruled other kings. His grandson, Naram-Sin, would go further, declaring himself not merely a king of the world, but a living god, and carving that claim into the cliffs of the Iranian plateau. In the 23rd century before Christ, Naram-Sin went to war with Elam, and the conflict ended not with subjugation or slaughter, but with a written document, a formal treaty guaranteeing Elamite independence in exchange for alignment with Akkad's foreign policy. The first international treaty in human history, signed on the Iranian plateau. After the Akkadians came the Ur-III dynasty, then the Old Babylonian period, the Kassites, the Assyrians, each empire inheriting the administrative and legal architecture of what came before, as though civilization itself had become a kind of sediment, each layer building on the last, adding depth but never erasing what lay beneath. By 1792 before Christ, when Hammurabi of Babylon came to power, Mesopotamian civilization had been accumulating law for over 1,000 years. Hammurabi's contribution was not invention, it was codification. 282 laws carved into a black diorite stele, nearly 2 1/3 an ewer, in one of the D-All writer's scent line of tricks. It meant that the Aquasiora preached the Holy Oire. The laws regulated wages, set the price of medical procedures, established liability for builders whose structures collapsed. A builder whose house fell and killed its owner was executed. Governed divorce and inheritance, and enshrined a principle that would echo through legal history for millennia. Accusation alone is not guilt. A man is innocent until the evidence speaks. 3,700 years before a court had ever heard the phrase presumption of qualified. The Assyrian Empire rose to dominance in the 9th century before Christ. It was the most brutal military machine the ancient world had yet produced. Iron weapons, heavy cavalry, siege engines capable of breaching any wall in Mesopotamia, and a policy of mass deportation, entire populations, hundreds of thousands of people, uprooted from their homelands and scattered across the empire to prevent the formation of resistant national identities. The Assyrians conquered Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Levant, and Anatolia. For nearly 3 centuries, they were the undisputed masters of the ancient Near East. And then, in 612 before Christ, the walls of Nineveh fell, a coalition of Babylonians and Medes. 2 civilizations the Assyrians had tried to crush at different moments, allied and annihilated the empire in a single campaign. Nineveh was not merely captured, it was obliterated, so completely that when the Greek historian Xenophon marched past its ruins 2 centuries later, he did not know what city it had been. Into the vacuum stepped Nebuchadnezzar the Tut of Babylon, the greatest builder since the Sumerian kings. Nebuchadnezzar raised Babylon to a scale the ancient world had never seen. A double wall wide enough for 2 chariots to pass side by side. The Ishtar Gate, glazed in deep lapis lazuli blue, decorated with golden bulls, and dragons of a species that had no equivalent in nature. A ziggurat that rose 90 meters above the Euphrates plain and could be seen from 20 miles distant. Babylon in 570 before Christ was home to 500,000 people, the largest city on earth, and in 539 before Christ, it fell to Cyrus the Great of Cassanovaramiya, Persia. Not by siege, not by storm, Cyrus diverted the Euphrates. He lowered the river's level beneath the city walls and walked his army in while Babylon celebrated a festival. The greatest fortification system ever built was defeated by hydrology. Babylon did not burn. Cyrus was too intelligent to destroy what he had just won. He freed the Jewish exiles. He restored the priests of Marduk to make them whole. He issued a proclamation in cuneiform on a clay cylinder, declaring himself the liberator of Babylonian people. The Cyrus cylinder is now in the British Museum. It is the world's first declaration of human rights. This is where most histories of Mesopotamia end. The fall of Babylon to Persia in 539. The conquest of Alexander 2 centuries later. The slow fade of a civilization into propox. But Babylon's fall to Cyrus was not the death of Mesopotamia. The Persian Empire absorbed Babylon and left it functioning. Greek rulers did the same after Alexander. Mesopotamia remained, productive, populated, and literate for centuries after the last Babylonian king was deposed. What killed Mesopotamian civilization was not conquest. It was language. Sumerian, the original language of Uruk, of the first writing of the oldest legal codes, had ceased to be spoken around 2000 before Christ, replaced in daily life first by Akkadian, then by Aramaic. But for 1,000 years after it died as a spoken tongue, Sumerian was preserved in writing. Priests and scribes continued to copy Sumerian texts. Schools trained students to read and write a language no living person had spoken for generations, the way medieval scholars maintained Latin long after it had ceased to be anyone's mother tongue. Then the schools closed, not because of conquest, not because of plague or famine or fire, because fewer and fewer students came. Because the tradition had become too specialized, too fragile to survive the successive disruptions of empire, war, and institutional collapse. By the 1st century after Christ, cuneiform, the script invented in Uruk 30 centuries earlier, had been abandoned entirely. The last known cuneiform tablet was written in 75 CE. 3,000 years of accumulated knowledge, mathematical tables, astronomical observations of a precision that would not be matched in Europe for a millennium, medical diagnoses, pharmacological recipes, legal precedents, epic poetry. The oldest flood narrative in human literature, written on clay tablets, sealed inside a dead language, waiting. It would wait for 1,800 years. The first successful decipherment of cuneiform came in 1857. What the scholars found inside those tablets was not the record of a primitive people reaching towards civilization. It was the archive of the ancient world, complete, coherent, centuries ahead of what history had assumed. And the world had simply forgotten how to read it. Between 2 rivers, on a flat plain in modern Iraq, a civilization existed for 3,000 years. It built the first cities, invented writing, the wheel, the 60-second Sectuan minute, the 360-degree circle, the concept of empire, the presumption of innocence, the first international treaty, the first map of the night sky. It was not destroyed by a superior civilization. It was not ended by war or famine or catastrophe. It was forgotten, slowly, irrevocably, across centuries, as the schools closed, as the scribes died without successors, as the clay tablets dried and cracked and were buried beneath the reg, accumulating sediment of the Euphrates plain. What remains of it is not in Mesopotamia. The Ishtar Gate is in Berlin. The Cyrus Cylinder is in London. The tablets are in Chicago, Paris, Philadelphia, and Istanbul. And the measurement of time, 60 seconds to a minute, 60 minutes to an hour, remains exactly where the administrators of Uruk left it, in the clay, in the count, in the first invoice ever written.